Hello.
Greetings, everybody. We're in 1 Corinthians 6 now, having just finished the chapter on disfellowshipping and seeing that Paul makes it a congregation responsibility, not elders' responsibility. We're going to see something similar here.
Mm-hmm.
We want to read 1 Corinthians 6, 1 to 8 to see how another issue is causing scandal besides this man that's committing immorality with his own stepmother. We have another issue that Paul feels he has to address right away that should involve the whole church.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to read it from the New World Translation, right? There's happily no real serious translation problem here.
Yeah, just one thing cleared, written a little better
Mm.
in other translations. Okay. Does any one of you who has a dispute with another dare to go to court before unrighteous men and not before the holy ones? Or do you not know that the holy ones will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you not competent to try very trivial matters? Do you not know that we will judge angels? Then why not matters of this life? If then you do have matters of this life to be tried, is it the men looked down on in the congregation whom you assign as judges? I am speaking to move you to shame. Is there not one wise man among you who is able to judge between his brothers? Instead, brother goes to court against brother, and before unbelievers at that. Really, is it already a Really, it is already a defeat for you when you have lawsuits with one another. Why not rather let yourself be wronged? Why do you not rather let yourself be defrauded? Instead, you wrong and defraud, and your brother at that.
First, notice the priority of love of the brethren, over personal rights. That's something we should remark upon today, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get to the real question, as in chapter 5, it's what does the theocratic arrangement look like here? Well, it's not at all like you're familiar with if you're a Jehovah's Witness, where the elders handle all judicial matters. Anything important goes to them.
So you don't hear him say anything about take it to the elders.
We have remarked before in the first 5 chapters about the absolute absence of elders.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole 29 chapters of the 2 Corinthian epistles, no mention of elders. What's going on?
And you're talking about, first of all, a very serious sin in chapter 5.
Yeah.
And now he's talking about matters, what does he call it, trivial? Or at least matters that they should be able to handle themselves. Among themselves.
And he doesn't advocate going to the elders. So it's as if he's deliberately holding back from that knee-jerk response to, well, hand it to someone who has the power.
Yeah.
And apparently many of them are not doing what Paul counsels them to do here and are taking judicial matters outside the congregation to the world. And he's shaming them here. Obviously he's shaming them, but he's shaming the whole congregation. He's not picking on individuals.
It's not an elder responsibility, it's a congregation responsibility.
He
Take it before the holy ones or the saints.
The saints, yeah. The ESV says, dare go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints. Again, not elders. And how does he reason on that? He says, do you not realize that you're going to judge the world? The saints are going to judge the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, do you not realize that we are to judge angels? Now, where is that in Jehovah's Witness theology?
You never think in terms of yourself as a judge. It's the organization. And even beyond Armageddon, you're still thinking the organization's going to be in charge and they're going to be your judges.
Forever?
Well, yeah.
It seems like forever, doesn't it? So you're going to still be reading publications through the millennium, and you're going to be judged on the basis of how you respond to what's being... Yeah. No, this is not the concept of either the old or the new. So you have Daniel 7, for instance, where we're told that The kingdom will be handed over to the saints. Paul seems to be picking up this idea here.
Mm-hmm.
So this verse 4 is a bit of a problem the way they translate it. So it's not serious, but I'll read you the ESV version. So if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? So depending on which translation you go with, you're going to either decide, well, there's no authority within the church, so we go outside.
Yeah.
Or we're going to the wrong people within the church. And then he asks the question, can it be there's no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers?
Yeah.
I would say this is a flat proof. The fact that you don't understand any of this if you're a witness, even if you're a member of the governing body. There's no one wise enough in the Watchtower to figure out the very plain truth that's on the surface here, namely that it's the congregation's responsibility. And as you made the point in our prep, no, the way the Watchtower does it, the theocratic arrangement, where elders are the only ones who know the facts.
Yeah. So if there is a matter that's a concern among people in the congregation, in the organization, you take it to the elders. They know all the facts. You don't even know all the facts, because it's between whoever the wrongdoer is and the elders. And then if there's any kind of decision made, it's them that makes the decision and nobody else knows about it. So in a way, I know when we were asked to a meeting, and I said to them, we would be willing to do this as long as we have our family there, the congregation invited. Well, of course, that's not the way the organization does things, and that's what they said. And when I presented that to my mother, she was like, well, that would be an embarrassment. So she says, what if the charge had been something immoral? Wouldn't that be an embarrassment? Well, yeah, it would be an embarrassment, but isn't that part of the point? is that checks that kind of behavior if you know that it's taken before the whole congregation to help that individual. So you can't hide sin, but right now in the organization you can hide your sins.
Yeah, the theocratic arrangement as understood by Jehovah's Witnesses makes it easy for the congregation, or specifically the elders, to hide, to whitewash anything and to cover it up even for decades.
Yeah. No, at least, the congregation is unaware of dangers because they're not told of sin and it's not judged in their presence. So you end up actually encouraging sin rather than fighting it.
And the evasion of responsibility.
Yeah.
Whereas this, the way Paul sees it here, is in total continuity with the Old Testament, as the Watchtower itself has admitted on occasion, even in the instance that Vivian just talked about, where we're in one last conversation with our elders and they say, we want to have a meeting with you, and we say, okay, if we can have our friends, family, and the congregation there. Knowing full well the Watchtower has recently gone into print saying this is a wonderful thing about the judicial system in Israel under the judges and beyond, which is the judges sit in the gate, everybody who wants to can come, the witnesses come, the accused, of course,
everyone
and the accusers.
Is aware of what the problem is and can make personal judgment on it themselves, even as to how they're going to handle it. Whether to help the person or decide whatever.
This might not be unembarrassing, for sure, for individuals, but it's a way to make justice transparent and to make sure justice normally will get done.
Yeah, and justice isn't overruled by 3 people.
But you have said, in your theocratic arrangement, you just know better. And you've broken continuity with both the New Testament way of administering justice, Paul gives it here, and the Old Testament way.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of quotes, right? Scroggie, in his great book, and we certainly want to publicize Scroggie's great, actually it's a 3-volume book called The Unfolding Drama of Redemption. It's not an in-depth Bible study, but its coverage is very wide, broad, and I think it's one of the best introductions or overviews to the entire Bible. The Unfolding Drama of Redemption. You can get at least one of these volumes on in PDF form for free. And he has a note here in his note about this chapter, right, that I think is well worth reading.
From what we have said about life in Corinth, it will be seen that most of the converts had been rescued from appalling moral and social conditions, and the influence of these things does not leave one at the time of conversion. The spirit of dissension, uncleanness, the neglect of moral discipline, quarrelsomeness, unseemliness, irreverence, and self-assertion are all reflected in this letter. I think that's very important for us as ex-witnesses, because we have this picture of, if there's any problems, you cast the person out. For any of these things, like moral discipline, if the person who is converted has come from, in this case, a pagan background, there's a lot of problems with your character, and that doesn't change overnight.
Yeah.
So you would expect within the congregation there to be problems that are having to be faced by the congregation, whereas we have it that you just get rid of those people.
Yeah. So they should be dealt with, Paul is saying, among yourselves, and it's not to be handed over to a judicial committee. This is a congregation matter. And then you realize how continuous that is with what Christ has said about what was the common practice of the synagogue. If you read Matthew 18, when there's a dispute among brothers and they can't resolve it, and they bring friends or witnesses in to try to resolve it, that doesn't work. What do you do next? You don't take it to the elders. You tell it to the congregation.
Yeah.
We put a link into that last time.
And I think it's because we don't get that there's a process that goes along with becoming a believer, and a long time correcting of the problems that you have that are part of your character because of your time as an unbeliever. That we look at the church and we see those problems and we think, well, that just disqualifies them.
Yeah.
Whereas Corinthians was a church. It was called the church. It was called the congregation. And they had all these problems. You see it all the way through the letters.
I want to read what Frederic Godet has to say about this passage, because he makes a point that might not register when you read through it and see what we just talked about, which is, what does Paul expect them to understand already? These are new Christians, all right, and they've got a lot of problems that they mostly inherit from their Corinthian background. Corinth being one of the most corrupt cities in the Roman world, Paul goes there very early. He also had gone to Thessalonica before he got to Corinth. So he writes the letters to Corinthians and Thessalonians within about 2-3 year period in the early 50s, mid 50s. And he's talking to them as if they should know certain things from what he told them before. And among the things he wants to say, don't you remember I told you these things, are things like the Antichrist, the second coming, the man of lawlessness is related to the Antichrist. Here he's talking about judging angels and judging the world, and these are things we call eschatology. And you go to churches today, and if they're not evangelical churches, you tend to find most Christians, churchgoers, know nothing about this subject. Yet Paul seems to think this is basic. Here you have where Godet comments upon this. This is Frederic Godet commentary on 1 Corinthians, as you can see, a sturdy book. He says, Christians receive the title of honor, saints. They are people whom a divine consecration has profoundly separated from the unjust and sinful world, and who ought therefore to possess within them the standard of justice. Had not Daniel seen the judgment given to the saints of the Most High? Remember that verse where we have the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7, and we're told that finally God administers justice, and the saints of the Most High get the kingdom, involving judging, not just being judged and being judged righteous. And then he goes on to say, by the formula, do you not know, or do ye not know, which occurs no less than 10 times in our epistle, the apostle alludes to the doctrines he had delivered to the church at the time of its foundation. Here it applies to a very special point of Christian eschatology, and from the example it may be concluded how detailed was the instruction which the churches received from the apostle. So although they're baby Christians in both Thessalonica and Corinth, this is still basic teaching. What's our link?
Actually, I think your link is tied to what you just said.
Well, I remember what it is. It's basic books on Bible prophecy, right?
Yeah.
Which is just an introduction to about 6 books, which we considered as a tremendous blessing during our first years out, and which should be basic library for Christians if you're going to understand eschatology at all.
So it lists a number of names.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.